Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Very much appreciated. I've seen a lot of your content, on LinkedIn, and I really wanted to kind of dig deep into a couple things. Really, like the sort of the process for establishing the product marketing function from the ground up, and then really digging into, um, you know the perspective of when you have a new leader coming in. What does that kind of look like? How do you establish some crystal clear strategies based on company objectives? How to help your team really get there by setting the right expectations within the team and the organization. And maybe we can just really dive into kind of like the operational piece. If you could walk me through what PMM, kind of team charters look like from your perspective.
For sure, and thanks so much for having me, George. Excited to be here. Yeah, so when you start at a new company, let's say you're the product marketing leader, and you really have to establish the PMM function from the ground up. Like you mentioned, the first thing you really want to do is kind of establish the vision for the team. And the way you do that is by talking to different leaders across the organization, understanding what the company's objectives are, and then figuring out how PMM ladders in, right? How it fits in. The second thing you do is once you have that, crystal clear strategy determined, is you want to figure out how to help your team get there, right? So you can do that by setting really clear expectations. And like you mentioned, PMM team chart is a really easy way to do that. Product marketing, as I'm sure you've seen, like the role varies at any organization, right? You can be at a Fortune 500 and just specializing in position and messaging. You can be at a startup and literally doing everything, so on and so forth. So defining that team charter where you're really saying, look, this is the scope of work that the team is going to focus on. And by the way, here are the outcomes we want to reach. That just makes everything crystal clear, and it makes it a lot easier for your team to succeed.
Awesome. Now, are there any sort of, variables or frameworks to be able to determine based on where we're at as a business? Maybe it's firmographic information, maybe it's other variables that will really help you start to define those kind of pieces that you mentioned, those goals, those jobs to be done, those KPIs and those sort of things.
For sure. So like you mentioned, it depends not just on company stage in terms of like, is it a Series A or is it a Fortune 500, but also what's going on in the business today. So is churn a huge issue, right? You can land the account, but once that customer's contract is up, they're gone. Or is it an issue of, top of funnel content? You need to work really closely with marketing to target your audience and get them to be aware of your company. Is it more of a conversion issue, right? A win rate issue, right? Then you want to dig into win-loss analysis. So you really, your goals and your focus areas are defined by what the company's currently experiencing, combined with where you want to go to the future, right? What's your future trajectory, which include, of course, the company objectives and the company goals. So putting that all together is kind of where you figure out where your team charter and where your focus is for now. But a team charter is really an evolving document. It should change as the business changes. At a startup, that might change, quarterly or twice a year. At a Fortune 500, probably more stable. Maybe it's a once a year, twice a year type of update. But it's a living, breathing document that you want to update as the business updates.
And do you think that document should live in something like Google Docs or something, or is the platform irrelevant, or do you have any sort of tools that you really like to use to manage these things?
So I think, like you mentioned, the tool isn't as important. I think what's more important is shareability and going and distributing this and presenting it to different teams. So what I like to do is go to maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3 company meetings to kind of explain, hey, just joined the organization. Here's what product marketing is going to focus on. If you have team members already, you have them join the conversation and introduce themselves as well. And then you also go to your key stakeholders, right? So you're going to go to a meeting, a product team meeting. You're going to go to a sales team meeting and really tailor the content to them. So say, hey, at a high level, here's what product marketing does. Here are focus areas. Here's what that means for you, right? So from a sales perspective, we're going to train you. We're going to create collateral for you, so on and so forth. For product team, right, we're going to help you with the product roadmap. We're going to interview customers and get those insights for you for the roadmap. We're going to launch things together, right? For customer success, we're going to help you with adoption. We're going to help you create collateral and onboarding that really, really resonates, so on and so forth.
Interesting. From a, that again, that perspective of that new leader that's coming on board, how do you start to determine, how, for example, how many PMMs you have to hire, or maybe there's some tough decisions that you have to make to maybe, slim the team down based on these sorts of variables. Are there any sort of experiences you've had, or anything that you've seen that could maybe help guide some of those new PMM leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. So product marketing setups and organizations really vary at every company I've been at. So some of them have been a one-to-one relationship with product management. So, hey, we have a product manager that focuses on product X. We have a product marketer that focuses on product X. Other times it's been more focused on audiences. So these are the customers we engage with directly. These are the customers we engage through a third party. So that product marketer focuses on enabling that third party to sell. We've had it based on functions, right? So, hey, someone's focused on content and events. Someone's focused on sales enablement. Someone else is focused on customer research. So to your point, it really depends on the needs of the business. And that's why I think the setting up the team charter and having those initial conversations with leadership and with key leaders across the org, just understand what their priorities are, how the business is moving, what the forward trajectory looks like. And then also where the gaps are now, that's going to help you figure out where to place PMMs and what to hyper focus on. So for example, if everyone tells you, hey, we're having a fantastic experience getting sales, but it's really retention that's the issue, then maybe you want to consider, we should have a product marketer focused on the customer journey post sales, right? It just depends on what the needs of the business are, really.
Got it. So it really sounds to me like this individual should take very much like a consultant experience, or perspective, I should say, to assessing the business, and then starting to kind of like think about after that the what are those areas that they're going to optimize or hire for. Speaking of hiring and onboarding, do you have any sort of tips for leaders out there, or maybe even individual PMMs, for setting up those sort of what I know you call like success meetings to help build those cross-functional relationships, and then help to kind of start to inform, your strategy, your positioning, your messaging, and this is, of course, assuming that you've already done that analysis and you already kind of have come up with some of those low-hanging fruit to set as priorities.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of like you mentioned, if it's a more established company where you already have, your cross-functional relationships built, you already have strategy, positioning, messaging docs created, then it's pretty straightforward. You figure out who your key stakeholders are. So usually that's some combination of product, sales, customer success, if you have an education team or sales enablement team, so on and so forth, right? So you set up your team for success by having them do these onboarding meetings with these various groups, with these various stakeholders. And your goal is really for them to, number one, start building that relationship, but number two, identify gaps. We in product marketing, we kind of talk about this concept of like being fresh, or having fresh eyes, or not, being not non-polluted, or some version of that, right? Where you can come in and have an honest conversation with someone, a straightforward conversation where you have no preconceived notions of what something should be, what something looks like. You haven't even talked to a customer yet. You haven't, dove into the product yet. So those conversations are really, really insightful for you to immediately see gaps a lot more easily than once you've been there for a few months, you already have product knowledge, et cetera. So again, the goal there is to set up your team to have those cross-functional start developing those cross-functional relationships by having those meetings. And then in terms of documentation, I mean, if you already have existing documentation on strategy, positioning, messaging, if you have those company objectives we talked about, that product marketing team charter, those are all things you want to share with your team from the get-go. So what I've found really successful is I'll set up a pretty like straightforward schedule for probably like the first 2 weeks of a new hire's time at the company. And the first week and a half is probably more focused on, hey, let me give you a lay of the land. Let me go through the org chart. Let me talk to you about our products at a high level. Let me talk to you about our company objectives. That transitions to let's do a deep dive on position and messaging. And then really the bulk of the 2 weeks is then spent on, or the remainder of the 2 weeks, I should say, is spent on building those cross-functional relationships. So getting, those meetings set, having them, meet with these various stakeholders, jump on customer calls, so on and so forth. Those are really the ways you set them up for success.
Virtual working or these remote first environments have really presented challenges across every organization, just given the separation, right? Given the lack of that serendipitous kind of collaboration and those sort of things. From what I'm hearing, and I've heard this, through all the kind of interviews and so on that I've done over the last few years, it's there's this common theme, which is like PMMs have to have those deep relationships with different functions, and really being able to foster those become very difficult when you're just, kind of like seeing a face on a screen. Any sort of I don't know, tips from that qualitative perspective that you've seen product, marketing leaders put together to help really kind of like facilitate those relationships? Maybe it's, offsites, maybe it's different tools. I know there's a lot of tools now that'll allow you to create kind of like a virtual room where people just kind of hang out and work together, those sort of things.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely here on the remote environment, it's been a big shift, I think, for most folks, like you mentioned. Two things come to mind. So one, previous manager of mine, Michelle Sawa, she started these meetings that she called walking syncs.
Yeah.
So they were more for the product marketing team to kind of get to know each other, create relationships among ourselves, and really work well together. And the only rule was well, there were two rules. One, you had to go and do something physical. So go walk outside, go walk on a treadmill, go on a bike ride, do something physical. And number two, you could not talk about work. So the beauty there is we learned, incredible things like, oh, this person used to, deadlift at a world record level. This and was on ESPN and like competed nationally. This other person is a huge cook and spends 18 hours making the perfect brisket in their smoker. We learned travel secrets, like the best way to get a flight, a flight that's really tricky that's sold out. We learned all these things completely unrelated to work, and it makes your team function better, makes your team like each other more, see each other as, the people that we are beyond work, which, like you mentioned, in a virtual environment is tough. And then the other thing is I had another leader who created quarterly meetups. So we did this in a few different ways. So one was the entire company, of course, right? The entire company getting together. That was once or twice a year. Then we did kind of, so not just product marketing, but the bigger team that you're on, whether it's product or marketing or some other team, having kind of a quarterly strategy session. And then what I would do as a product marketing leader is also invite my team and make it into a team quarterly session. So what was really nice is you kind of had those layers where you could, if you timed it right, you could have maybe a company session, let's say in January, a division session, I'm going to call it for lack of a better term, let's say in the first few days of February, and then a few days following that immediately, you have a team session. So you can really go into that team session supercharged with this company direction, division direction, and now team direction. So you're making something kind of abstract and not necessarily specific to PMM. Over time, you make it specific to PMM and you turn it into, you answer the so what and what does it mean to me?
Yeah. I love that. That just that focus on the human piece. Let's shift into product marketing fundamentals. Like I know this is kind of a broad question, but how do you turn customer research into insights?
That's a great question. Definitely depends on the company, but at a high level, number one, it's talking to customers, right?
Mm,
So getting that customer research is kind of step number one. In terms of turning that into insights, you really look for themes and trends. And I had someone on my team who said after 5 interviews or so, 5 to 7 is usually the sweet spot at the startup level. Um, Once you've had 5 to 7 interviews, you kind of start hearing the same thing over and over and over. So you start identifying those trends and those themes, and you realize, this is insightful. This is something we can actually use to market our product. This is something we can use to define how we want to build the product. This
mhm.
is how we want to price it, package it, message it, of course. Um, so I think there are those trends that you see, and then two, you also combine that with industry trends and um, what your competitors are doing. So you're having these interviews and they keep telling you that blue water bottles are all the rage, right? I'm just looking at my water bottle here. So blue water bottles are all the rage. Then you see your competitors are suddenly expanding into retail. Let's say they were D2C, now they're expanding into retail and they're selling blue water bottles. And then you see that there's an industry, group that's having a conference, and the key headline topic is blue water bottles. So you kind of put all these things together and start, and usually it's not that obvious, George, but you start putting together these tidbits and try to turn that into insights. And the real big factor is, how does this impact the company? How do we turn this into something actionable?
Mm.
You got to pass the so what test.
Got it. Got it. Well, let's move into the product launch. And again, this is another large sort of topic here, but if you had to distill some insights or tips down into maybe a couple, what would you say your launch process looks like?
Sure. So that's usually what I've seen is product tiers, right? So launch tiers. So you're launching a product. Every launch can't be the same. There has to be some kind of tier levels, because if everything's important, nothing's important, right? That's a classic kind of saying.
Prioritization, yeah.
Exactly. So it's the same thing with product launches. If you're launching what's usually known as like a tier A or tier one, or if you use t-shirt sizes, it's an XL or large, you're launching a major product, you're going to want to pull out all the stops. You're going to want to create sales collateral. You're going to want to update your website. You're going to want to train your internal teams like sales, customer success, support. Um, Try to reach your current customers and prospects through every channel you have available, put out press releases, in-app notifications, emails, blog posts, videos. If you have third parties that you work with or sell through, you're going to want to enable them, train them, launch a marketing campaign that's cross channel marketing campaign, so on and so forth. So you want to pull out all the stops, versus for something a little bit smaller that's maybe not life changing for customers or for prospects, but it's a big deal, maybe you scale that back by 30%. And if it's something even smaller, like a new feature, maybe that's something you just mentioned to current customers, or it's something you add to a sales deck, but not something you make a big splash about. So when I think about product launches, I really try to figure out the tier system and make it really crystal clear internally and externally, because especially when you're setting up a PMM function from scratch, having those expectations set that, hey, 99% of the time when we do an XL launch, here's what it looks like, just makes everything flow a lot smoother internally and externally.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. If you were to think about the relationship between launches and marketing campaigns, you had to describe that. What are the best ways to kind of articulate what those things look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. For product launches, right, and we're distinguishing launches from releases, right? Releases is just when something's available. Launch is when you actually promote it to the market.
Hmm.
In terms of marketing campaigns versus launches, in a perfect world, you want to set those up where your XL launches, right, or your tier A, whatever term you want to use, your biggest launches are aligned with your marketing campaign. So you're launching a brand new capability, a brand new product. You want to do a marketing campaign about that, right? You want them to be hand in hand. If you're launching a minor feature that you're not going to make a big buzz about, it doesn't necessarily have to align to your marketing campaign or have any kind of relationship. But the medium and larger kind of launches, you want to align to your marketing campaign. So if you're telling the market a story about your product security and you're launching maybe a new security add-on or a new security module, so on and so forth, you want those launches to be aligned with the marketing campaign. It'd be kind of strange if you were telling a story about security and then you launched a sales module, right? You want them to intersect and align.
Awesome. We care a lot about sales enablement here at Asset Mule. From a, kind of pre-sales perspective, how should product marketing approach sales enablement?
It's a great question. So before the sale, right, the main thing is enabling and training your team, whether it be sales like BDRs, account managers, AEs, or customer success. Regardless, the goal should be to train them through the product before it launches, right? So before they're selling anything, they should be aware of number one, what does the product do? What are the benefits? What are the jobs to be done? How does it compare to the competition? Is it industry changing, industry new, or are we really just catching up to an existing competitor with existing functionality? Have a deep dive into the product, how it actually works, be able to demo it, objection handling, et cetera. So you really want to start that before they sell it, right? So they're well equipped. But beyond that, you want to go and think about, okay, what are those outreach sequences that we want to create? Whether you're using outreach, SalesLoft, some other kind of tool, what is the content that we want to create? And sales teams vary, right? Some BDRs, most BDRs that I know at least, want to write their own sequences. So they want to write their own emails, their own call scripts. That's fine. What you want to do is give them bullets that highlight the key components of the launch or the key components of your product, right? You want to focus on A, B, and C, how they write that up to them. Other teams want it completely written for them. Maybe marketing has a copywriter and they just want bullets as well. Either way, you want to be able to provide that content. And the other piece is collateral. I've never had the luxury of working with a product like Asset Mule, but if I did, that'd be fantastic because I could create custom content for sales, right? I think whether you work at Fortune 500, midsize, or startup, you get a ton of requests, usually from the sales team saying, hey, this collateral is great, but I really needed to do this. Especially when you're working with, when your end customer is working in a committee style decision making, which means you're working with, I don't know, anywhere from 6 to 10 people that are involved in the sales process and the part of that buying committee. That's when you really want custom tailored content per persona, and having the ability to do that quickly and easily is fantastic. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I know there's so many topics that we could cover. Maybe we can do some additional episodes because I know you're just a warehouse of insight around this topic. So thank you so much. If you were to give folks, let's say, some handles or URLs or social networks to reach you, if they wanted to follow you, maybe even just connect for some insight, what are the best channels to reach you?
LinkedIn for sure. Apart from that, always can reach me on my website, which is just jonathanpipek.com. And then I also mentor product marketers for free on adplist.org.
Awesome. Great. Well, listen, happy holidays and thank you so much.
Thanks. You too.